Hello. So in this video, I'm going to give you a lesson plan for teaching logos, one of the three traditional rhetorical appeals that comes down to us from Aristotle. So like many of my lesson plans, this is something that can be adapted either for a 50-minute course or a 75-minute course. Though I think it lends itself more to a 50-minute course. So if you're teaching 75-minute courses, you may want to plan something in addition to this lesson plan for that day. So the first thing that I do on Logos Day is I will have students define logos or explain logos for their opening free write. So that gets them thinking about what this term actually means. And then sometimes you will have the majority of students, because I have 3+ of my students read their opening free writes aloud. Sometimes you will have those opening free writes largely identifying types of evidence, and sometimes you will have more sort of sophisticated explanations of it's about structuring arguments and the way that information is interpreted to make a logical basis for the message itself. And so that's fantastic. If you get that more sophisticated approach, that's fantastic. If you get here are different types of evidence, that's also good because you can work with that as well. So then we will put up on the board information about logos, and I divide it into two categories. One is that evidence category, and the second is argumentation. So typically with evidence, I'll just have students list types of evidence that you could use in an essay, and they typically come up with good stuff. Facts, statistics, quotes, anecdotes, personal observations. They may mention theory or philosophy. They may mention argument by analogy or comparison. They may mention images or videos, and so on and so on. And so you want a healthy list of types of evidence that you could use to structure to provide evidence for your argument. And you as the instructor can add any that you think are important that don't make the list. Then you shift to argumentation. And I emphasize that argumentation is the braver part of logos, that this is the more important component of this appeal. And I do that first by asking if anyone can define argumentation, which frequently they can't, though they may make a decent stab at it. But I define argumentation for them, generally, as something along the lines of the structure and logic that underpins the movement of an argument. So I emphasize structure and logic, how things are organized, and the sets of connections we make between information, the way we interpret evidence, etc., etc. And so that's the next thing I put on the board, actually. Underneath that definition is interpretation. And then I write one of my favorite writing maxims, which I will tell them is one of my most important pieces of writing advice, which is that evidence is not self-evident. So I put, under the definition of argumentation, I will put the word interpretation, and then under that, evidence is not self-evident. And I ask them what they think that means. And generally, they have a pretty good sense that you have to interpret and explain the evidence that you're giving. And I often use the example of the gun control debates, right? Because within gun control debates in the US, both sides can take the same data point and claim that it proves their position. So the evidence is not in itself, the evidence doesn't prove an argument in and of itself. What it does is allows us to put that piece of evidence into an interpretive framework. And And again, this is all stuff that I'm explaining to my students. We put data, we put information, evidence, whatever it is, into an interpretive framework, and this is how it develops meaning. It's not in itself meaningful. And then the other thing that I will put below that is argument structure or essay structure. I'm going to talk about the importance of the way that information is organized within an argument. The structure of it matters because everything should be interconnected. Then I have my students turn to something that we read for homework. And I, this semester, at time of recording, used Sojourner Truth's speech, Ain't I a Woman, which I think works fantastically well for this. And what I have them do, partially it works really well because it's a rhetorical masterpiece, and partially it works really well because it's fairly short, so they can work on it quickly in class. And what I have them do is first identify a logos appeal that Truth is making. So what does she do that is based in logos? Then I have them write an evaluative thesis statement about it. So how persuasive is this particular logos technique and why? Then I have them develop a mini outline. So a very basic outline. It can just be topic sentences, but they may start filling it in with some evidence, particularly drawing from the text of Truth's speech itself. And so this gets them thinking not only about what is Truth doing in terms of logos, what's she doing to build her case logically, but how would we approach building a case? How would we approach building a rhetorical evaluation of logos in this text? So they're both analyzing it and practicing it, which is fantastic because you're getting that sort of double whammy approach. Then I'll give them a decent amount of time to do that because it takes a while to come up with not only a thesis, but with the points that you would want to make in your argument. Then I will have two groups read their thesis and mini outlines aloud, and as a group we'll talk about what those thesis and mini outlines do well and anything that could be done to improve them, bearing in mind that they were generally written in about 12 to 15 minutes. And so again, this is an analytical exercise that also has us thinking about the way that a particular text, in this case the thesis and outlines, use logos to their advantage.